say how incredible it has been to be a part of the organizing team of this amazing meeting here. Personally, the most heartening note of today's conference, the 4 days that we have, Human Rights in Childbirth Conference, is its aim to put women at the center of maternity care. That really stood out for me. And stood out perhaps because every time I think about my story of birth, I'm constantly searching for myself in it. And that's when I realized I was just an onlooker, perhaps. So maybe after sitting on the passenger seat for so long, women might have a chance to be on the driver's seat, finally. So we have heard about a lot of personal stories today. I think from the morning, we are quite full of a lot of experiences that women have been sharing, stories that have already been spoken. So I want to take a little different track from that. Definitely women's stories, women's narratives, but Dr. Aprajita Gogoe, while talking in the morning, mentioned that medical textbooks, do they include anything in the chapters about these experiences that we've been hearing about? That brings me to the question that what is it that we are looking for when we are talking about childbirth, the treatment of childbirth? We are basically talking about the treatment of women in society in general. It's a much more larger issue, and the treatment of childbirth, I must say, is a part of that. So the lens of gender, definitely. Now, women's reproductive labor, it has been the subject of many studies, and it forms a very important part of what is termed as medical science. But how do we know about birth? Where is this knowledge about childbirth coming from? This is the fundamental question of how do we know what we know about birth? This is perhaps the first step that will bring us into the understanding of my topic here, which is the politics of being unheard. How is knowledge about childbirth being created? Well, the process of knowledge creation, it's not a very bias-free process anyways. And there is a privileging of dominant discourses, or there is a politics of the process of knowledge creation itself. And this process definitely overlooks, it can afford to overlook the lived experiences of women. Because women have for a very long time not been a part of the hegemonic system that has legitimized this process and legitimized knowledge itself. While we have not been a part of that dominant discourse, I think we all agree that women have also been carriers of a very informal system of knowledge. I have to talk about the Dai tradition here. An informal system, definitely there was a system of knowledge that they were carrying, which is almost wiped out now from India. Now, why did this happen? The reason women's felt experiences of pregnancy and birth got undermined, I think it was the search for something that is objective, something that is scientific. It is privileging of what is more scientific. And women's lived experiences were not a part of that. So today's, when we are discussing about women's voices, and we want those voices to be heard, we must first recognize why it was not being heard anyways, and why it still isn't being heard. Now in this point, we have to recognize that there is a gap between women's experiences and the conceptual frameworks that exist in science. It is from this gap some very interesting things are happening. This gap is actually the point from where women's movements are starting. Organizations like Birth India is taking shape. It is this gap of women's experiences and what are the conceptual frameworks that is determining the knowledge about childbirth. Interestingly, this gap is also leading to a different kind of research, to a different kind of feminist research approach on subjects like biology, and these are also becoming sources about knowledge related to women's bodies. Thus, women's voices, stories, experiences that get excluded from mainstream scientific process can become a very special source to create knowledge. it can lead to democratizing of this process of knowledge creation. And therefore it becomes very important that we keep on collecting these birth stories, we keep on listening to these experiences, because this is the opportunity we have where the creator of knowledge or the scientist or the researcher and the participant both become equally shareholders of that knowledge. They are co-creating that knowledge. It is not about someone going in and finding some fact. It's about the participant who's equally involved in that. And a lot of subjectivity, we all know, is involved when it comes to the study of birth. And we do need these kind of unconventional sources, so-called, subjective sources like narratives, like personal diaries, letters, photographs. I think we really need to look into them. There's a need to archive them, to have repositories of these resources, to understand the subject better. And these are the resources which is actually going to be able to challenge the politics of being unheard. Coming to medicalization, I mean, what has it done? I mean, we all know. It has just made birth into a disease. And it has been taken out of from the hands of midwives. It has been mystified, women have been alienated from it, and it has been used to exert a kind of control over the bodies and choices of women. It's a very simple understanding. Someone has already mentioned this quite a few years back. French social thinker Foucault, and I'm going to mention him here, I can't do without him. So he has theorized that disciplines that have emerged in the 18th century were new mechanisms of power, and everyday lives of individuals have come under surveillance in sites such as schools, prisons, and guess what, hospitals. This power that we are talking about here is exercised through an arm we are very familiar with: technology. Technological intervention, it deeply impacts the embodied experience of childbirth. Technology has implications for women's reproductive health, safety, choices, as our bodies are the vehicles for these technologies. However, a blanket response to technology, I'm not foolish. I've grown up, I was born and brought up in India, so I'm not going to give a blanket response to that, because we know that technology can also be a huge resource, depending on the circumstance. But for many of us, technology application could also be very severely flawed. Technology can mean a commercialized tool for control and profit. And birth is not just a biological act. It is not something, by bringing this whole thing up, I'm not telling that, it's not a discussion about privileging the natural or the technological. All I'm trying to say is there is a cultural quotient to it. Fertility, reproduction, they have always been socially defined territories. Our experiences of it are also actively shaped by society and by the culture. And it is this political and cultural condition in which the technology is being used where the problems arise. To understand this, I'll not go into the details, but I have been interviewing a lot of women also for my own research, and one little thing. So in one of the birth stories that I recorded, so the woman told me that every time she went for a checkup in a very plush private hospital in Mumbai, an ultrasound was conducted before entering the doctor's chambers. Now she questioned this every time, every checkup, which would be once a month definitely. So she questioned this, saying that she did not want it every time, but clearly was told by the hospital administration that this is the process. To go into the chamber, first you need to go into the first chamber, which is the ultrasound chamber, the report goes to the doctor, and then you go and meet the doctor, and then it is discussed further. Now, shouldn't women's attitudes be a part of evaluation of such antenatal surveillance? It has been studied before, and this is not something new. I know all of you are already thinking about this. And Anne Oakley, British sociologist, she refers to, while talking about ultrasonographies, What she talks about is patient comfort. Now in medical science, we talk about patient comfort. Just imagine a pregnant woman lying flat on her back, bladder full. That's supposed to be comfortable, right? So Oakley had no doubt that medicine has to go beyond the scientific. It has to become more social. Now, how many women are actually questioning this authority that we are talking about today? How many women are actually openly expressing their choices as consumers of medical care? They may not be a majority. In fact, Sohini also said that, it's a micro movement. So and we constantly get questioned about how many of you are opting. It's a very small number of people. So if it's that small, in the Indian context at least, so I want to say that the voices of doubt may not be of the majority. But does that mean that we have to question the seriousness of it? There is a play between two things, the questions of satisfaction and silence. They go hand in hand. It can be played around, these two words. In every field, silence of the oppressed group is taken as the satisfaction by the dominant group. Very out of context examples here. We have the happy slave and the rich master. We could have a controlling husband and a contented housewife. So, where is the question of satisfaction coming here? We need to think of silence, satisfaction, and think a little deeply about it, because images that are being created are actually images that can help to contain certain mobilizations, certain movements which can lead to social change. We know about this, Ruth from Birth India, right? How these movements get contained. And so, our experiences and voices are marginalized, we are aware of it, we know, difficult to be heard, but we are learning to resist it. And we are learning to discover our own discourses, our own subaltern discourses, I'd say. We live in a culture where silencing is a part of the socialization process, and the main challenge here for those who really want to understand childbirth, the challenge is to listen, and to listen a little carefully perhaps. With this conviction that someone has to listen, I did something. I have made a petition. Here, I think this is so I made a petition. I wanted to find out, I thought that every woman should have the right to know the cesarean section rate of the medical facility that she's going to individually. Now, this is not a top state secret that we can't know about, because there are national health surveys conducted, and when I go, I can find out, Mumbai, urban Maharashtra and rural Maharashtra, but that does not help me. When I go to my local hospital, I don't know what the rate is out there. So my demand was that please make it mandatory, and Fernandez Hospital has already made it. Thank you so much for that. Not waiting. And guess what? I think around 1 lakh of people have already voted for it. I need your support. That's the link. And to curb heightened medical intervention, we know, this seems like an idea. Why I did this? Because it felt like this could be translated into some action, because we were talking about a lot of things, but this is a simple step and it can be done. It will make facilities more accountable, it will make consumers more informed, and it will definitely ensure safe, evidence-based practices. So it would be great to find, I'm sure, please go and check this out. If you agree with it, please sign on it. It's high time that we do get heard. Thank you so much for listening.